A mother vanished at a train station, but 12 years later, her son notices a strange man following him home and discovers something shocking. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The alarm cut through the darkness at 5:30 a.m., 30 minutes earlier than usual. Catherine Mercer silenced it quickly, not wanting to wake Noah. She lay still for a moment, watching January frost patterns on her bedroom window, then took a deep breath. Today mattered. Her 31st birthday, yes, but more importantly, the Harvard interview that could change everything. The wooden floor creaked beneath her feet as she padded to the bathroom. In the mirror, tired green eyes stared back. She tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear and splashed cold water on her face. No time for birthday indulgence. Not when better pay and flexible hours for Noah were within reach. Catherine moved quietly through the modest two-bedroom apartment she'd transformed into a home over the past 6 years. Photos of Noah at different ages adorned the walls alongside a single photograph of James in his construction uniform, his smile frozen in time. Her fingers brushed against it briefly, a habit she couldn't break. Before continuing to the kitchen, the tea kettle had just begun to whistle when she heard the soft padding of small feet behind her. "Mommy, can I wear my new sweater today?" Noah appeared in the doorway, red hair tousled from sleep, rubbing his eyes. Her eyes, everyone said, the same vibrant green. "Of course, sweetie, but breakfast first." Catherine placed a bowl of cereal in front of him. "Remember Mrs. Martinez is coming today? I have that important interview, but I'll be back in time for cake." Noah nodded, mouth full of cereal. "You promised chocolate with strawberries." "And it will be," Catherine smiled. "It's in the fridge, covered up. Just don't touch until I get back. Deal?" By 7:35, after helping Noah dress and organizing his favorite toys in the living room, Catherine answered the door. Elena Martinez, a 62-year-old who lived downstairs and often watched Noah, entered carrying a small wrapped package. "Happy birthday, dear," Elena said, handing over the gift. "You didn't have to, Elena," Catherine smiled, unwrapping a small blue scarf. "It's beautiful, thank you." "Matches your favorite coat," Elena winked, pointing to the navy blue coat hanging near the door. "What time do you think you'll be back?" "The interview is at 10. If all goes well, I should be back by 2 p.m. "At the latest," Catherine replied, checking her bag. "Noah's lunch is in the fridge, labeled with his name. If he gets restless, the new dinosaur book is on the shelf." Catherine knelt to hug Noah. "Be good for Mrs. Martinez. Mommy will be back soon, and then we'll celebrate, okay?" "Will you bring me a present?" Noah asked, making Catherine and Elena laugh. "But it's my birthday, silly," Catherine said, kissing his forehead. "But maybe." At 8:10, Catherine left wearing her navy blue coat, the new scarf, black pants, and winter boots. A light snow fell as she walked 4 blocks to the bus stop that would take her to South Station. A security camera at the CVS pharmacy on the corner of Dorchester Avenue captured her waiting for the bus, checking her watch twice. At 8:47, security cameras at South Station recorded Catherine entering through the main door, adjusting the scarf around her neck. She walked to an automated machine, purchased a ticket to Cambridge, and headed to Platform 5, where she was supposed to board the Red Line train. The station was busy, as always on weekday mornings. Catherine was just another dark-coated figure among dozens of hurried passengers. This was the last known image of Catherine Mercer. She never arrived for her Harvard interview. She never returned home to cut her birthday cake. At 4:37 p.m., Elena Martinez, worried, called Margaret Winters, Catherine's mother. She said she'd be back by 2 p.m. at the latest, and she's not answering her cell. Margaret, a retired nurse of 58, tried not to show concern. Maybe the interview ran late, or she met a colleague and went for coffee. But by 6:20 p.m., as the sky darkened and snow fell more heavily, Margaret arrived at her daughter's apartment. Noah sat at the kitchen table, staring at the uncut chocolate cake, while Elena paced back and forth, repeatedly calling Catherine's phone. "She would never do this to Noah. Never," Elena repeated. Something happened. Margaret tried a few more calls to Catherine's acquaintances, with no success, before deciding to call the police at 7:45 p.m. The sergeant on the phone explained that adults needed to be missing for 24 hours before a formal report, but would send a cruiser to collect preliminary information given the circumstances. When officers Thomas Reed and Julia Sanchez arrived, Noah was already asleep on the couch, clutching the phone. Margaret provided a description of Catherine, recent photos, and details about the Harvard interview. "Are you sure she actually had an interview?" Officer Sanchez asked. "Of course," Margaret responded, offended. She'd been excited for weeks. She spoke with Dr. Lawrence Rivers from the literature department. "We'll verify that," said Reed, writing down the name. "Did she have problems with anyone? Ex-boyfriends, school issues, debts?" "None of that. Catherine has been a widow for 6 years. No serious relationships since then. She's dedicated to her work and son." Officer Sanchez inspected the apartment, noting that Catherine's passport was in the dresser drawer, along with all her important documents. Her toothbrush and personal hygiene products were in the bathroom. The only thing missing was the bag she carried with her, a brown shoulder bag containing her wallet, phone, and personal documents. At 9:15 the next morning, Margaret received a call from Harvard's English department. Dr. Rivers was perplexed. Catherine never showed up for her interview, nor had she contacted them to cancel or reschedule. At 11:20, police confirmed that South Station cameras showed Catherine entering, but no camera captured her boarding any train or exiting the station. She simply disappeared into the crowd. On the third day, the case was transferred to the Missing Persons Unit. Detective Manuel Martinez, no relation to the babysitter, and his partner, Detective Sarah Okonkwo, were assigned. They ordered analysis of all available footage from the station vicinity and began interviewing employees, regular commuters, and homeless people who frequented the area. As Margaret held Noah, who silently cried while clutching his mother's favorite sweater, Detective Martinez examined the new information about the mysterious gray-haired man, realizing they now had their first concrete lead, but also the first evidence that Catherine's disappearance might not have been voluntary. Detective Martinez stared at the grainy surveillance footage, studying the gray-haired man who might be their first real lead. The image wasn't clear enough for facial recognition, but it was something. The first tangible evidence that Catherine Mercer hadn't simply vanished of her own accord. 3 months had passed since Catherine's disappearance. The initial media frenzy had subsided, replaced by occasional updates that contained no actual news. The case remained active, but was increasingly gathering dust among Boston PD's unsolved mysteries. "You're still here?" Detective Okonkwo placed a coffee on Martinez's desk. "It's almost midnight." "Just reviewing the witness statement again," Martinez replied, rubbing his tired eyes. The newspaper vendor saw Catherine arguing with a gray-haired man near the bathrooms. "But we've shown him photos of every gray-haired man with a criminal record in the database, and nothing." "We'll find something," Okonkwo assured him, though her voice lacked conviction. "How's the family doing?" Martinez shook his head. "The boy has nightmares, won't sleep in his own room anymore." 6:30 the next morning, Noah's screams tore through the apartment. Margaret rushed from her makeshift bed in Catherine's room to the living room where Noah had been sleeping on the couch for weeks. "It's okay, sweetheart," she whispered, gathering the trembling 6-year-old into her arms. "Just a bad dream." "Mom was trying to open a door," Noah sobbed. "She couldn't get out and kept calling my name." Margaret rocked him gently. "We're still looking for her. Everyone is still looking." Later that morning, Margaret sat across from Dr. Wilson, the child psychologist recommended by Noah's school. The office was decorated with colorful artwork and toys designed to put children at ease. "Post-traumatic stress is common in these situations," Dr. Wilson explained. "Noah is processing his trauma through nightmares. His refusal to sleep in his room suggests he's afraid of further abandonment. If he stays in the communal area, he'll know immediately if anyone else leaves." "But his mother didn't abandon him," Margaret said, her voice tight. Dr. Wilson nodded sympathetically. "Of course not, But to a 6-year-old who doesn't understand what happened, it can feel that way. After the appointment, Margaret returned to the apartment and entered Catherine's bedroom. Unlike the rest of the home, this room remained exactly as it had been on January 7th. Catherine's robe still hung on the back of the door, her book still lay open on the nightstand. Her perfume still sat on the dresser, gradually fading. Margaret carefully rearranged the family photos on Catherine's dresser, making sure Noah would always remember his mother's face. She ran her fingers over Catherine's hairbrush, finding a single strand of auburn hair that she couldn't bring herself to remove. That afternoon at Adams Elementary School, Noah sat in art class, ignoring Ms. Parker's instructions to draw spring flowers. Instead, he meticulously drew his mother in her blue coat, the way he remembered her leaving that morning. When Ms. Parker gently suggested trying the assigned project, Noah simply started another drawing of his mother. "He does this every day," Ms. Parker later told the school counselor. "It's like he's afraid he'll forget what she looks like if he doesn't keep drawing her." Back at the apartment, Elena helped Margaret prepare dinner while discussing their increasing challenge. Noah's questions about when his mother would return were becoming more specific, more desperate. "Yesterday he asked if she would be back for Easter," Elena said, chopping vegetables. "I didn't know what to say." "I don't either," Margaret admitted. "How do you tell a child his mother is missing without making him think she's gone forever?" "My nephew is a police officer," Elena said hesitantly. "He says after 3 months, the chances—" Margaret raised her hand to stop Elena's words. "I know the statistics, but until there's proof otherwise, Catherine is coming home." That evening, dozens of candles illuminated the courtyard of Adams High School, where Catherine had taught literature for 6 years. Colleagues, students, and parents gathered for a vigil, marking 3 months since her disappearance. "Catherine wasn't just a brilliant literature teacher," said Lisa Chen, the English department head. "She saw her students as whole people. When she noticed some of our immigrant students struggling with more than just Shakespeare, she started helping their families navigate the system, even assisting with legal paperwork." This revelation surprised Margaret. Catherine had never mentioned these activities, this extension of her classroom role, into something more like social work. After the vigil, as Margaret gathered the framed photo of Catherine she'd brought, a man approached hesitantly. "Mrs. Winters? I'm James Torres. My son was in Ms. Mercer's class," he said in accented English. "I wanted to tell you, your daughter helped me when I had problems at construction site, safety violations. She was asking questions, taking notes." "What kind of questions?" Margaret asked, suddenly alert. "About accidents not reported. About workers without proper papers being given dangerous jobs." Torres looked around nervously. She was very concerned, very brave. The next morning, Margaret sat at Catherine's laptop, researching Boston construction projects and workplace safety violations. Her search revealed multiple news reports about unreported accidents, particularly at sites developed by a company called Westridge Construction. By 8:45 a.m., Margaret was in Detective Martinez's office, showing him what she'd discovered. "Catherine was helping immigrant workers document safety violations," she explained. "This could be connected to her disappearance." Martinez studied the information with renewed interest. "Westridge Construction has projects all over Boston, including," he checked his notes, "a site near South Station called Bayview Tower. We should check if there's a connection." Later that day, Martinez and Okonkwo visited the construction site near South Station, showing Catherine's photo to workers. Though no one admitted recognizing her, Martinez noticed nervous glances exchanged between several men. That evening, Noah finally opened the door to his mother's bedroom, entering it for the first time in weeks. Margaret found him lying on Catherine's bed, his small face buried in her pillow, breathing in what remained of her scent. While organizing Catherine's desk later that night, Margaret discovered a folder on her laptop containing articles about workplace safety and news clippings about the Bayview Tower project. She immediately called Detective Martinez. "I found something," she said, her voice trembling with urgency. The next morning, Detective Okonkwo burst into Martinez's office. That Bayview Tower project Catherine was researching? It was under investigation for safety violations just weeks before she disappeared. While organizing the documents found on Catherine's laptop, Margaret discovered a handwritten note hidden inside a poetry book, meeting J.H., South Station, 1790 a.m., exactly the same day and place where her daughter would disappear a week later. Margaret stared at the note in her trembling hands. Meeting J.H., South Station, 1790 a.m. The handwriting was unmistakably Catherine's, with its distinctive looping G's and sharp horizontal cross on the T's. This wasn't just another clue, it was a revelation. Catherine had arranged to meet someone at South Station exactly where she would disappear just 1 week later. The next morning, Margaret handed the note to Detective Martinez in his cluttered office at Boston PD headquarters. He examined it carefully, turning it over as if the paper itself might reveal hidden secrets. J.H., Martinez muttered, immediately reaching for his keyboard. I'll run these initials through our database, check for known offenders, persons of interest in similar cases. Whoever this is, Margaret said, they might be the last person who saw Catherine before she disappeared. Martinez nodded grimly. Or they might be responsible for her disappearance. Across the department, Detective Okonkwo hunched over a computer monitor, reviewing South Station security footage from January 1st. Previously, they'd focused exclusively on January 7th, the day Catherine vanished. Now, with this new lead, Okonkwo carefully scanned the footage around. 9:00 a.m. on the 1st, looking for Catherine meeting anyone. The investigation had gained new momentum, but Noah's world continued to unravel. Later that morning, Margaret received a call from Adams Elementary. Noah had been involved in a fight. When she arrived at the principal's office, she found her grandson sitting alone, his right eye swollen and his lower lip split. He was defending himself, Mrs. Winters, Principal Davis explained once they were seated in her office. Another boy said some unkind things about Catherine. Noah stared at the floor, tears welling in his uninjured eye. He said Mom abandoned me because she didn't love me enough to stay. Margaret's heart broke anew. 6 months since Catherine's disappearance, and the whispers had started, the insidious suggestion that Catherine had simply walked away from her life, her job, her child. At home that afternoon, Margaret sat with Noah at the kitchen table, ice pack pressed gently to his eye. Sometimes people say cruel things when they don't understand, she explained. But I need you to know this. Your mother loves you more than anything in this world. She would never, ever choose to leave you. Then why isn't she home? Noah asked, the simple question hanging in the air like an accusation. While Noah rested, Margaret returned to her research. Using Catherine's laptop, she searched for information about Westridge construction. Multiple news articles appeared, detailing allegations of safety violations, suspected bribery of city inspectors, and the company's powerful connections. The owner, Leonard Drake, appeared in several photos with prominent Boston politicians. Meanwhile, Martinez showed Catherine's photo to journalists at the Boston Globe, hoping someone might recognize her or recall her contacting the paper about construction safety concerns. We have dozens of reporters and freelancers, the editor explained. If she reached out about a potential story, it could have been to anyone. By late afternoon, Margaret and Noah were having a difficult but necessary conversation about moving forward while still holding hope. Going back to school doesn't mean we've given up on finding Mom, Margaret explained gently. It means we're being strong, just like she would want. Noah nodded reluctantly. Can I still draw her pictures every day? Every single day, Margaret promised. That evening, Elena arrived with a dinosaur-shaped cake and a small wrapped package. Noah's 6th birthday had arrived, a milestone Catherine would miss. The small gathering, Margaret, Elena, and 2 of Noah's school friends, did their best to make it festive, but Catherine's absence loomed large over the celebration. As Noah blew out his candles, Margaret's phone rang. Seeing Martinez's number, she stepped into the kitchen to answer. "We've identified J.H.," Martinez said without preamble. "Jason Harrington, freelance investigative journalist, specializes in exposing corporate corruption and labor violations." The next morning, Martinez and Okonkwo arrived at Jason Harrington's modest apartment in Jamaica Plain. The living room resembled an investigative war room. One wall covered entirely with newspaper clippings, photographs, and sticky notes, all centered around Westridge Construction and the Bayview Tower project. Harrington himself appeared nervous, constantly glancing toward the window as he confirmed meeting Catherine at South Station on January 1st. "She contacted me in December," Harrington explained, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Said she had documents proving Westridge was covering up workplace accidents." He described Catherine arriving at their meeting with a manila envelope containing documents and photographs taken secretly at the construction site. The images showed workers without proper safety equipment, damaged scaffolding, and what appeared to be falsified inspection certificates. "She was focused, determined," Harrington continued, "said it wasn't just about general worker safety anymore. She believed a death had been covered up, classified as an accident when it wasn't." Harrington showed them the draft article he'd been preparing, exposing how immigrant workers at Westridge sites were forced to work in dangerous conditions, threatened with deportation if they complained, and how accident reports were routinely falsified or suppressed. Back at police headquarters, Martinez and Okonkwo connected the new information to their existing case files. Leonard Drake, Westridge's owner, had powerful friends in City Hall and, more concerning, connections to several high-ranking police officials. "This is bigger than we thought," Okonkwo said quietly. "If Catherine stumbled onto corruption reaching into the department." That evening, Margaret searched through Catherine's belongings once more, this time looking specifically for hidden items. In a carved wooden jewelry box beneath a false bottom, she discovered a small memory card wrapped in tissue paper. When inserted into Catherine's laptop, it revealed dozens more photographs of the Bayview Tower construction site, including one clear image of two men in suits examining blueprints on the hood of a luxury car. As Martinez was preparing to end his workday, his desk phone rang. The voice on the other end was disguised, mechanical. "Stop investigating Westridge if you want the teacher to return home," the caller said before hanging up. Martinez froze, his blood running cold. This was the first indication in 6 months that Catherine might still be alive. While the anonymous call was being traced to a public phone near Westridge Construction headquarters, Martinez received alarming news. Jason Harrington had been found unconscious in his apartment, his computer and all files on Westridge missing, and a handwritten note left beside his body. "Catherine Mercer tried to warn you." The handwritten note beside Harrington's unconscious body sent shockwaves through the investigation. Detective Martinez stared at the 5 words. "Catherine Mercer tried to warn you." As paramedics rushed to stabilize the journalist's condition, the attack was methodical, professional, a severe blow to the back of the head, no signs of forced entry, and a surgical removal of all evidence related to Westridge Construction. At Boston General Hospital, Martinez and Okonkwo stood outside the ICU, watching through the glass as doctors connected Harrington to monitors and respirators. The attending physician approached with a grim expression. "Severe traumatic brain injury," she explained. "We've induced a coma to reduce brain swelling. The next 48 hours are critical." "Any chance he'll remember what happened?" Martinez asked. The doctor shook her head. "Even if he survives, memory loss is likely." Back at Harrington's apartment, forensic technicians carefully processed the scene. Blood spatter analysis suggested he'd been struck from behind while sitting at his desk. Fingerprint powder coated surfaces throughout the small space, while a tech examined the journalist's computer setup. "They took the hard drive," the tech reported. "Very clean removal, not amateur work." By mid-morning, Martinez found himself standing outside Catherine Mercer's apartment, explaining to Margaret that a uniformed officer would now be stationed outside their door. "The attack on Harrington changes things," he said gravely. "We have to consider that whoever is behind Catherine's disappearance might target you and Noah as well." Margaret's face paled as she glanced back at Noah, who sat drawing by the window. He's already been through so much. Throughout the day, the apartment felt smaller, with the constant presence of Officer Ramirez in the hallway. Noah watched from the window, unusually quiet and observant. "Will we get hurt like the man from the newspaper?" he finally asked, his small voice barely audible. Margaret struggled to maintain her composure. "That's why the police officer is here, sweetie, to make sure we're safe." Early that afternoon, Leonard Drake arrived at police headquarters for questioning. Impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, the 60-year-old construction magnate carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting his way. During the 2-hour interview, Drake denied any knowledge of Catherine or Harrington, presenting flight records proving he was in Chicago on January 7th, the day of Catherine's disappearance. "I sympathize with the family's situation," Drake said smoothly. "But Westridge Construction has nothing to hide. We follow all safety regulations to the letter." After Drake left, Martinez headed to Captain Wright's office to request more resources for the investigation. The conversation quickly grew tense. "The connection between the teacher's disappearance and Westridge is circumstantial at best," Wright said dismissively. "Drake has alibis, political connections, and an army of lawyers. We need more before poking that hornet's nest." "Sir, someone attacked a journalist investigating the same company that Catherine was looking into before she vanished," Martinez argued. "That's not circumstantial." Wright leaned back in his chair. "Focus on other avenues for now. That's an order." After the meeting, Detective Okonkwo waited for Martinez in a quiet corner of the records room. "Something feels off," she whispered, showing him a file on her tablet. "I've been digging through old complaints about Westridge. 3 separate safety violation reports in the past 5 years were shelved without proper investigation," Martinez frowned. "By whom?" "Each by a different detective, but all signed off by the same supervisor." She paused meaningfully. "Captain Wright." That evening, a package arrived at Margaret's apartment. Following Martinez's instructions, she carefully opened it wearing latex gloves. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, lay the blue scarf Catherine had worn the day she disappeared. Margaret stifled a gasp as she lifted a Polaroid photograph beneath it. The image showed Catherine, clearly alive but with tape across her mouth, holding a newspaper dated April 17th, 3 months after her disappearance. Her eyes were wide with fear, but there was something else there too, a defiance, a message. Within an hour, both items were in the police lab. Technicians confirmed the absence of fingerprints and that the scarf contained traces of Catherine's DNA. The photo analysis determined it hadn't been digitally altered. Late that night, Martinez confronted Captain Wright with the new evidence. "This proves she's alive, being held against her will," Martinez insisted, placing the photo on Wright's desk. "We need to go all in on the Westridge connection." Wright studied the photo, his expression unreadable. "I'll authorize additional resources tomorrow. For now, go home. You look exhausted." As he was leaving, Martinez's phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "Just received message from unknown number. She's alive. Stop the investigation or this changes." The next morning brought another revelation. While reviewing missing persons cases potentially connected to Westridge, Martinez discovered that Raymond Foster, a municipal inspector assigned to the Bayview Tower project, had disappeared 3 months before Catherine, his case still unsolved. That afternoon, Okonkwo interviewed a former Westridge employee who spoke on condition of anonymity. "Everyone knew," the source said nervously. "Inspectors were paid off, safety reports falsified. When accidents happened, families were threatened or paid to keep quiet." As the day ended, Martinez sat with Margaret. In her kitchen, both staring at the Polaroid of Catherine. "We're facing an impossible choice," Margaret whispered. "If we keep investigating, they might hurt her. If we stop, we may never find her." Martinez took her hand. "There has to be a third option. I'll continue discreetly, off the books if necessary. As Martinez promised Margaret he would find a way to continue the investigation discreetly, a black van parked across the street from the Mercer apartment, and a gray-haired man photographed the window where Noah was drawing, before making a call and saying only, "I confirm the grandmother and boy are still in the apartment. Should I proceed as planned?" The gray-haired man's voice hung in the night air as Martinez drove away from the Mercer apartment, unaware of the surveillance. Within hours, everything would change. At 5:30 the next morning, urgent knocking startled Margaret awake. She opened the door to find Martinez, his expression grim in the pre-dawn darkness. "Pack essentials for you and Noah," he instructed in a hushed tone. "We've detected surveillance around your building. You're not safe here anymore." Margaret moved quickly, years of nursing training kicking in during crisis. She packed medications, clothes, Noah's favorite dinosaur toy, and the framed photo of Catherine that never left his bedside. "Grandma!" Noah appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "What's happening?" "We're going on a little trip, sweetheart," Margaret said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Detective Martinez is taking us somewhere safe." By 6:15, Noah was buckled into the back seat of an unmarked police car, confusion clouding his sleepy face as Officer Ramirez drove them through Boston's empty streets. Martinez followed in a separate vehicle, constantly checking for tails. "Where are we going?" Noah asked, clutching his dinosaur. "How will Mom find us when she comes home?" Margaret squeezed his hand. "We're just going somewhere safe for a while. And don't worry about your mom. Detective Martinez will make sure she knows where to find us." 4 hours later, they arrived at a modest house on a quiet street outside Burlington, Vermont. The property belonged to a retired FBI agent who owed Martinez a favor, off-record, untraceable. "From now on, you're Anna and Michael Grant," Martinez explained, handing Margaret new identification documents. "Use these names in public. Tell anyone who asks that you're visiting from Philadelphia while looking at potential retirement properties." That afternoon, Noah explored his temporary bedroom, running his fingers over unfamiliar furniture. The room had been hastily prepared with age-appropriate books and toys, but nothing felt right. "When can we go home?" he asked Margaret. "If Mom comes back, she won't know where we are." Margaret's heart ached at the hope still present in his voice. "Detective Martinez knows how to reach us. If your mom comes home, she'll be brought right to us." Back in Boston, Martinez met Okonkwo and 2 trusted officers in a forgotten storage room at police headquarters. Surrounded by dusty evidence boxes, they established their unofficial investigation hub. "We can't use department resources," Martinez explained. "Captain Wright is somehow connected to this. Everything we do stays between us." Okonkwo nodded gravely while setting up her laptop. "I've been reviewing Drake's Chicago alibi. Something doesn't add up." She pulled up airport security footage. "His boarding pass was scanned, but look, he's nowhere on the security cameras." Someone else used his ticket, Martinez realized, while Drake stayed in Boston. The implications were chilling. If Drake had fabricated his alibi and their own captain was involved in the cover-up, the conspiracy reached further than they'd imagined. The following week, Noah stood in front of his new school, wearing glasses he didn't need as part of his disguise. Margaret straightened his collar, noting how small he looked among the unfamiliar children. "Remember, your name is Michael today," she reminded him gently. "It's like playing pretend, but very important." Noah nodded solemnly. "And if someone asks about my dad or mom?" "You live with your grandmother because your parents travel for work." Margaret repeated their rehearsed story. "You don't have to share more than that." Later that morning, Martinez received the call he'd been waiting for. Jason Harrington had regained consciousness, but the news wasn't what he'd hoped. "He has no memory of the attack," Martinez told Margaret during their secured call. "Worse, he doesn't remember anything from the 2 months before it, including his meeting with Catherine." The neurologist explained the situation to Martinez that afternoon. "The amnesia could be from the head trauma, but we found unusual compounds in his blood work. It's possible he was drugged with something designed to cause memory loss." This calculated approach further confirmed they were dealing with sophisticated criminals who left nothing to chance. Every lead was methodically eliminated, every witness silenced. That evening in Boston, Elena Martinez sorted through a box of Noah's drawings in her apartment. Though she missed the boy and his grandmother terribly, she understood why they'd gone into hiding. As she organized the colorful artwork, a noise at her door made her freeze. Within seconds, two masked men forced their way inside. "Where are the items from the teacher?" one demanded, shoving Elena against the wall. "The drawings, notes, anything the boy might have given you." They ransacked her apartment with frightening efficiency, gathering every photo of Catherine, every drawing Noah had made of his mother, even the small journal where Elena had recorded Noah's memories of Catherine to help preserve them. When Martinez visited Elena in the hospital the next day, her face was bruised, but her spirit unbroken. "They didn't want to hurt me," she explained. "They wanted information. Asked if Noah had said anything about where his mother might be, if Catherine had given me anything to keep safe." Through tears, Margaret listened to Martinez describe the attack on Elena. "This is my fault," she whispered over the secure line. "I've put everyone in danger. Noah, you, Elena." The following day brought the first direct connection between the attack and Westridge construction. DNA recovered from Elena's apartment matched Vincent Maddox, a known enforcer with ties to organized crime who had been photographed with Leonard Drake at a charity event 3 years earlier. By late afternoon, Martinez and Okonkwo had traced Maddox to a law firm that represented Westridge in multiple lawsuits. The firm, Caldwell and Price, specialized in making problems disappear, usually through settlements with aggressive non-disclosure agreements. While Martinez drove back to Boston after visiting Margaret and Noah in their Vermont hideout, he received a call from dispatch. The body of an unidentified man had been found in Boston Harbor, with Catherine Mercer's cell phone in his pocket and a handwritten note. "The detective is next." Martinez stared at the body bag being loaded into the medical examiner's van, the harbor's icy January wind cutting through his coat. The dead man, later identified as Frank Moretti, a former Westridge security guard, had been missing for 3 weeks before washing ashore with Catherine's phone and the threatening note. This wasn't just evidence, it was a warning aimed directly at Martinez. 1 year had passed since Catherine Mercer vanished. The calendar now read January 7, 2012, an anniversary that weighed heavily on all connected to the case. In Burlington, Vermont, Margaret prepared for a brief, risky return to Boston for a memorial service they'd carefully organized. "This isn't a funeral," Margaret insisted, as she helped Noah pack a small bag. "It's a celebration of your mother's life and a reminder that we haven't given up hope." Noah nodded solemnly, having grown quieter and more thoughtful in the months since leaving Boston. At 6 years old, he carried a weight no child should bear, yet maintained the resilient hope that somehow, someday, his mother would return. The small chapel near Adams High School was sparsely attended. Only those Martinez had personally vetted were invited. Photos of Catherine through the years decorated the space. Catherine graduating college, Catherine teaching, Catherine laughing with Noah at his 5th birthday. Margaret greeted each guest personally, clarifying repeatedly that this gathering wasn't about closure, but continuing hope. Noah approached the makeshift altar, placing a new drawing among the photographs. The colorful image showed 3 figures, Noah, Margaret, and Catherine, holding hands beneath a rainbow. "For when she comes back," he explained to Elena, who had traveled from Boston despite her still healing injuries. At 11:15, Martinez slipped into the back of the chapel, accompanied by an undercover officer. His eyes met Margaret's across the room, communicating silently. There were developments, but this wasn't the place to discuss them. Later that afternoon, forensic technicians hunched over Catherine's recovered phone in the lab. Despite water damage, they managed to restore partially deleted data, making a startling discovery. The phone had been used months after Catherine disappeared. 3 calls were made in April, the tech explained to Martinez, all to public payphones in different parts of Boston. This aligned precisely with the Polaroid they'd received, showing Catherine holding the April newspaper. Someone had forced her to make those calls, but to whom and why? The widow of Frank Moretti received Martinez in her kitchen that evening, her eyes red-rimmed from days of crying. Frank quit Westridge 6 months ago, she explained, hands trembling around her coffee cup. Said he couldn't sleep anymore, that he'd seen things no paycheck was worth. He disappeared 3 weeks ago after saying he was meeting someone who could make things right. That night, Margaret and Noah stayed in a secure hotel rather than returning to their old apartment. At 8:00 p.m., Noah woke screaming from another nightmare. "I saw Mom," he sobbed as Margaret held him. "She was in a dark room, banging on the door. She kept calling my name." The following morning, Martinez dug through dusty archived files, searching for any connection between Richard Garland, the detective who'd investigated Westridge years before, and Catherine. Hidden in a 2008 report, he found what he was looking for. Garland had documented suspicions about Westridge's construction practices and potential bribes to city officials, but the case was mysteriously closed for lack of evidence. Meanwhile, Margaret visited Catherine's untouched apartment for the first time in months. Everything remained exactly as they'd left it during their hasty departure. Catherine's perfume on the dresser, her books arranged precisely on the shelves. Yet something felt different. Moving through the rooms, Margaret noticed small discrepancies. A jewelry box slightly askew, photo frames repositioned, Catherine's journal no longer perfectly aligned with the edge of the nightstand. Someone had searched the apartment, carefully, methodically, while they were gone. Back at headquarters, Okonkwo accessed internal personnel records, discovering that Garland's retirement hadn't been voluntary. He filed serious allegations against fellow officers, she told Martinez. Claimed they were deliberately burying evidence in cases connected to Westridge and other Drake properties. What happened to the allegations? Martinez asked. Internal Affairs investigated and found insufficient evidence. 2 weeks later, Garland retired with full benefits. Following this lead, Martinez tracked down Garland's former partner, a retired detective named Bill Connor, now living on Boston's outskirts. Richard went off the deep end, Connor claimed, avoiding eye contact. Started seeing conspiracies everywhere. Wouldn't trust anyone, not even me. Last I heard, he moved somewhere up north, cut off contact with everyone from his old life. That evening in Vermont, Noah retreated to his temporary bedroom after dinner. Margaret found him later, asleep with Catherine's photograph clutched to his chest. Beside him lay a small notebook labeled Letters to Mom, each page dated meticulously with messages about his day, new friends at school, and his unwavering belief that she would return. "I made honor roll, Mom," read one entry. "Grandma says you'd be proud. I'm keeping my promise to read every night like we used to." Margaret wiped away tears as she carefully replaced the journal without waking Noah. His faith remained unshaken despite everything, a testament to the bond between mother and son that even a year's absence couldn't weaken. Late that night, Martinez discovered an old photograph in Garland's personnel file showing the detective with a young female intern at a department function. Though the quality was poor, something about the young woman's posture and profile reminded him of Catherine. At exactly midnight, Margaret's secure email pinged with a message from an anonymous sender, a set of GPS coordinates, and the words, "She was here." When plotted on a map, the location revealed a remote property in rural New Hampshire. While Martinez quickly assembled a team to investigate the coordinates received by Margaret, his phone rang with a blocked number. Upon answering, he heard only breathing for several seconds before a digitally distorted voice stated, "Catherine Mercer is alive, but not because of you, detective. You're investigating the wrong people," followed by a recording of Catherine's voice, clearly panicked, saying, "Noah, Mommy loves you. Be strong." The recording of Catherine's voice echoed in Martinez's car, her words playing on repeat in his mind long after the call ended. "Noah, Mommy loves you. Be strong." Her voice sounded strained but unmistakably alive. Recorded recently, the forensic technician would later confirm. This was the breakthrough they'd been waiting for, yet it came with a chilling implication. Someone had been watching Martinez closely, enough to know exactly when to call. By 5 a.m. the next morning, tactical teams surrounded the remote New Hampshire cabin indicated by the GPS coordinates. Thermal imaging drones confirmed no heat signatures inside the structure, but Martinez insisted on maximum caution as they approached. "Remember, this could be a trap," he warned through the radio. "Move in carefully." The cabin stood isolated among dense pine trees, its weathered exterior suggesting years of neglect. Yet fresh tire tracks in the mud told a different story. Someone had been here recently. Officers breached the single door at 6:15 a.m., finding an interior that confirmed their worst fears and highest hopes simultaneously. The main room contained a narrow bed, a small table with a metal chair, and a bucket in the corner serving as a makeshift toilet. Most telling were the deep scratch marks on the inside of the door, desperate attempts to escape. "Look at this," called a forensic technician, carefully lifting a scrap of navy blue fabric caught on an exposed nail near the window. Martinez took it with gloved hands, immediately recognizing the texture and shade that matched Catherine's coat from surveillance footage on the day she vanished. "Bag everything," Martinez ordered. "Every fiber, every fingerprint, every food wrapper. I want to know exactly who was here and for how long." Back in Vermont, Martinez played the recording for Margaret in the secure living room of their safe house, now guarded by 5 rotating officers. Noah was at school. They'd agreed he shouldn't hear his mother's voice this way, a disembodied plea that would raise too many painful questions. "It's definitely Catherine," Margaret confirmed, her hands trembling as she returned the phone to Martinez. "Recorded within the last 3 months, according to your analyst?" Martinez nodded. "The audio compression format wasn't in use before then. Now we need to understand why they wanted us to find that cabin and why they're contacting us now after a year of silence." In Boston, Okonkwo had taken enormous risks accessing sealed personnel files related to Richard Garland. She discovered that Catherine had attempted to contact Garland 3 weeks before her disappearance, leaving a message with the retirement facility where he supposedly lived. The message log shows she claimed to have information relevant to his previous investigations, Okonkwo told Martinez during their secure call. But here's the interesting part. Garland had already checked out of that facility 2 months earlier, no forwarding address. The connection between Catherine and the former detective grew clearer when Okonkwo secretly interviewed a retired officer who had worked with Garland. Richard discovered something big before he left, the ex-officer revealed nervously. Said it involved people high up in the department protecting construction interests. Nobody believed him because he couldn't prove it, or because they were part of it. This information led to an increasingly tense meeting between Martinez and Captain Wright later that afternoon. "You were taken off this case, Detective," Wright said coldly. "Yet I hear you're still digging, now into former Detective Garland's conspiracy theories?" "With respect, sir, Catherine Mercer is still missing, and we have evidence she's alive," Martinez countered. "And these aren't just theories anymore. We found a cabin where she was held." Wright's expression hardened. "You're wasting department resources chasing ghosts. Your obsession with this case is affecting your judgment." Martinez left the meeting knowing he was running out of time and allies within the department. In Vermont that evening, Noah sat at the kitchen table of their safe house, meticulously drawing the cabin based on descriptions he'd overheard. Despite Margaret's efforts to shield him from investigation details, Noah's acute awareness of adult conversations had only sharpened during their months in hiding. "I need to draw it exactly right," Noah insisted when Margaret asked about his project. "So when Mom comes home, I can show her we never stopped looking." The boy's unwavering faith both inspired and devastated Margaret. That night, unable to sleep, she began searching online for any connection between Catherine and activism that might explain her interest in construction sites. An old Boston College newspaper article revealed a young Catherine participating in protests against a development project that would displace low-income families, a project, Margaret noted with growing excitement, that had been one of Leonard Drake's early ventures. The next morning brought devastating news. Martinez had been officially removed from the Mercer case. The notice cited concerns regarding objectivity and investigative methods, and ordered him to surrender all case materials immediately. "They're shutting us down," Martinez told Okonkwo as he cleaned out his desk. She responded by discreetly sliding him a USB drive. "Everything important is copied here," she whispered. "I'll keep working officially while you work from the outside." Martinez visited his doctor friend, explaining his situation while carefully omitting details that might put the physician at risk. Within an hour, he had medical leave papers citing stress and exhaustion, giving him a month of freedom to investigate without departmental oversight. In his apartment, Martinez created his own investigation board, linking Westridge Construction, Richard Garland, Catherine Mercer, and the growing list of potentially corrupt police officials. Working off books was dangerous but necessary. He was now convinced the conspiracy reached into the highest levels of the department. Margaret agreed to meet Martinez secretly to share what she discovered about Catherine's college activism. As Martinez drove to their meeting point, he noticed a car following him several blocks back, maintaining perfect distance, slowing when he slowed, turning where he turned. Instead of evading, Martinez made a sudden decision, pulling over abruptly and approaching the vehicle, where he was shocked to find not an adversary, but an elderly man with a gray beard who lowered the window and said calmly, "Detective Martinez, my name is Richard Garland, and I know exactly what happened to Catherine Mercer." Richard Garland's weathered face studied Martinez through the car window, his gray beard neatly trimmed despite his otherwise disheveled appearance. For a moment, Martinez stood frozen on the street, the man he'd been searching for now suddenly appearing like an apparition. "Get in," Garland said, gesturing to the passenger seat. "We shouldn't talk in the open." Martinez hesitated only briefly before sliding into the car. The interior smelled of coffee and old leather, the back seat cluttered with maps and file folders. As they drove to a small, nearly empty cafe on the outskirts of town, neither man spoke, each sizing up the other. At 9:30 p.m., sitting in the farthest booth from the entrance, Garland finally began his story. "I met Catherine Mercer in 2009, he said, his voice gravelly from years of cigarettes he'd since abandoned. "She came to me with questions about workplace safety violations at the construction site where her husband James had died." Garland's eyes took on a distant look as he described the young widow who had appeared at his office, clutching newspaper clippings and accident reports. "She didn't believe the official story," Garland continued. "James had called her the night before his accident, telling her he'd discovered something concerning about the structural integrity of the project and planned to report it. The next day, he was dead. A tragic fall, according to company records." Martinez leaned forward. "So Catherine's investigation began long before her disappearance. It started with her husband's death." "Exactly," Garland confirmed, "and her suspicions were well-founded." The former detective pulled out a weatherproof pouch containing photographs. Catherine and Garland investigating the Bayview Tower site together, capturing images of inspectors accepting envelopes from site managers, documentation of substandard materials being used while premium materials were listed on official forms. "She was methodical, careful," Garland said with admiration. "Started as an amateur seeking justice for her husband, but she had natural investigative instincts." Then Garland placed a final photograph on the table. Martinez felt his stomach drop as he recognized Captain Wright meeting with Leonard Drake outside an upscale restaurant, exchanging what appeared to be document folders. The timestamp showed it was taken just weeks before Catherine vanished. "Catherine took this," Garland explained. "She'd followed Drake for weeks, documenting his meetings. When she caught this exchange with Wright, she knew she'd found the connection between the department and Westridge. The former detective's expression darkened. I warned her about the risks, told her these people wouldn't hesitate to eliminate problems. But she was determined, said it was about justice for James and safety for others. Martinez struggled to process this revelation. His direct superior implicated in corruption that potentially led to Catherine's disappearance. "What happened to you?" he finally asked. "Why did you disappear?" "They discovered I was helping her," Garland said simply. "One night I found my house had been searched. The next day, photos of my daughter and granddaughter were left on my car seat with a simple message, 'Retire now.' I had no choice." The following morning, Margaret received an unmarked envelope at their safe house. Inside was a single strand of auburn hair, unmistakably Catherine's distinctive shade, and a piece of paper with new GPS coordinates. "It came with the regular mail," Margaret told Martinez from a payphone near Noah's school. "How did they find us? We've been so careful." Martinez assured her they would move to a new location immediately while he investigated the coordinates, which identified an abandoned warehouse on Boston's outskirts. By 11:00 a.m., Martinez, Garland, and Okonkwo were studying the location on maps spread across Martinez's kitchen table. "This warehouse belonged to Harbor Development," Okonkwo noted, "a Westridge subsidiary that dissolved 3 years ago. On paper, it's been empty since then." Martinez called in a favor from a contact at the electric company. The records revealed a surprising truth. The supposedly abandoned warehouse had maintained consistent power usage for the past 18 months, precisely the period of Catherine's disappearance. As they planned their approach to the warehouse, Okonkwo shared another discovery. "I found financial transfers from Wright to offshore accounts coinciding with major Westridge project approvals. The amounts increased over time. He got greedy." Later that afternoon, the 3 investigators crafted a careful strategy to survey the warehouse without alerting Wright or his associates. They needed to verify if Catherine was being held there without triggering another relocation. In Vermont, Noah sat with Margaret, asking the question that had been haunting him. "If Mom comes home, will she still know who I am? I look different now." Margaret fought back tears, embracing her grandson. "Your mother would recognize you anywhere, Noah. A mother never forgets her child's face." That evening, while Martinez prepared surveillance equipment for the warehouse operation, Garland revealed his own tragic history with the case. "They threatened my family the same way they likely threatened Catherine," he explained, showing Martinez a faded photograph of his wife and daughter. "The choice is impossible, your principles or your family's safety." Martinez returned to his apartment late that night to collect additional equipment. The moment he opened the door, he sensed something was wrong. Nothing appeared disturbed, yet the air felt different. On his desk lay a photograph that hadn't been there before. A recent image of Noah and Margaret outside their Vermont safe house. Turning over the photograph, Martinez found a handwritten message. "Finish what we started, or they will be the next." With a jolt of recognition, he realized the handwriting matched Catherine's journal entries he'd studied months earlier, suggesting an unsettling truth. Catherine wasn't merely a victim in this conspiracy, but possibly an active pawn in a deadlier game than anyone had imagined. Martinez stared at the handwriting, his mind racing. The evidence before him suggested an unthinkable possibility. Catherine Mercer wasn't just a victim, she was somehow participating in this elaborate game. But why? Was she being coerced, or had she become something else entirely during her years of absence? "We need eyes on that warehouse," Martinez told Garland at precisely 5:00 a.m. The next morning, they huddled in the pre-dawn chill, setting up surveillance equipment in an abandoned office building with a direct line of sight to the target. Garland, despite his age, moved with practiced efficiency, positioning micro-cameras and directional microphones with trembling but determined hands. "These aren't department-issued," Garland noted, examining the high-end equipment. "Personal investment," Martinez replied grimly. "Some things can't go through official channels anymore." Across town, Okonkwo sat at her desk, maintaining her cover as an officer still working within the system. She discreetly accessed Captain Wright's financial records, each keystroke a calculated risk. What she found confirmed their suspicions: regular deposits into offshore accounts coinciding perfectly with Westridge project approvals. The pattern was undeniable once you knew to look for it. At 10:15 a.m., their patience was rewarded when a black sedan approached the warehouse. From their vantage point, Martinez watched a man in a dark coat enter briefly, leaving behind what appeared to be grocery bags and a small box. The visitor departed after exactly 20 minutes, following what seemed like a carefully practiced routine. "Someone's definitely living there," Garland murmured, reviewing the footage. "But is it Catherine?" That afternoon, Martinez reached out to his courthouse informant, a clerk who had provided valuable information in the past. The news was significant. A massive lawsuit involving Westridge Construction and the city of Boston was scheduled for the following week, a $250 million case related to structural defects in the Bayview Tower project. "If this case goes to trial, a lot of people stand to lose everything," the informant explained during their brief meeting in a parking garage. "Careers, fortunes, freedom, all hanging in the balance." Meanwhile, Margaret and Noah were being relocated yet again. The photo left in Martinez's apartment had exposed their Vermont location, necessitating an immediate move deeper into isolation. An unmarked van transported them to a remote cabin further north, owned by Garland's former FBI contact. "I'm tired of running," Noah said softly as they unpacked their few belongings. At 12 years old, his face had lost the roundness of childhood, his green eyes, so like his mother's, now carrying a wariness beyond his years. On the second day of surveillance, at 8:45 p.m., cameras captured a gray-haired man arriving at the warehouse. His face became clearly visible under the security lights. Vincent Maddox, the same man whose DNA had been found in Elena's apartment after the attack. "He's talking to someone inside," Garland observed, adjusting the directional microphone. Unfortunately, the warehouse's thick walls prevented them from capturing any meaningful audio. "That's our confirmation," Martinez said as Maddox departed an hour later. "Maddox is connected to the assault on Harrington, the break-in at Elena's, and now this warehouse. The question is, who is he meeting with?" Okonkwo delivered another crucial piece of information the following day. Captain Wright had served in the same district as Garland years earlier. In fact, he was one of the officers specifically named in Garland's allegations before his forced retirement. "The connections keep tightening," Martinez observed, unable to sleep as he reviewed their evidence at 2:30 a.m. He noticed something they'd missed. Drake's movements followed a pattern. Whenever there was activity at the warehouse, Drake was notably absent from his usual haunts. It couldn't be coincidence. In Vermont, Noah's therapy continued via secure video calls. His therapist noted with concern that his drawings increasingly depicted his mother in confined spaces, resembling warehouses or small rooms, as if his subconscious was processing information his conscious mind couldn't fully comprehend. After 3 days of surveillance revealing a consistent pattern of deliveries and visits, Martinez and Garland decided it was time for direct action. With Okonkwo providing remote support, they planned to enter the warehouse after the supply vehicle departed, during a predicted 12-hour window without visitors. At 11:30 p.m., under cover of darkness and armed with lock-picking tools, the 3 investigators entered through a service door. The warehouse's cavernous main space stood empty and dust-covered, creating the perfect facade of abandonment. But a section in the center had been converted into a living space. A bed, a desk, bookshelves, and a small kitchenette, all hidden from windows. "Look at these books," Martinez whispered, examining titles that matched Catherine's collection from her apartment. Classics of literature, Austen, Dickens, Hardy, arranged in the same order she'd kept them at home. Garland discovered the most damning evidence: a loose floorboard concealing a compartment containing a detailed journal, The handwriting matched the note left for Martinez, documenting observations of Wright, Drake, and others involved in the conspiracy. Their investigation was cut short at 12:30 a.m. when headlights swept across the warehouse. Windows, an unexpected vehicle approaching. They retreated hastily, taking only the journal and photographs found at the scene. Back at their temporary base, Martinez flipped through the journal, stopping abruptly at an entry dated just 2 weeks earlier. They finally made a mistake. I know where the bodies are. Literally. Noah is turning 16 soon, and I promised myself I would be there, even if it's the last thing I do. Below the text was a detailed map of a location Martinez recognized immediately: the cemetery where James, Catherine's husband, was buried. The cemetery map burned in Martinez's mind as he studied its careful markings. Catherine's journal entry was unmistakable. They finally made a mistake. I know where the bodies are. Literally. Noah is turning 16 soon, and I promised myself I would be there, even if it's the last thing I do. This wasn't just another clue. It was a countdown to Catherine's planned emergence after 10 years in the shadows. Noah's birthday is next week, Martinez said, spreading the cemetery map across his kitchen table where Garland and Okonkwo had gathered at dawn. Whatever Catherine has planned, it centers around this location near James's grave. Garland squinted at the markings. These notations indicate something buried approximately 6 feet west of James Mercer's headstone, shallow, based on her measurements. By mid-morning, the trio arrived at Mount Auburn Cemetery, tools concealed in maintenance uniforms borrowed from Garland's network of contacts. The area around James Mercer's grave appeared undisturbed, with well-manicured grass and wilting flowers from a recent visitor. Margaret comes here on the anniversary of his death, Martinez explained as they began carefully removing a section of sod where Catherine's map indicated. Beneath just 18 inches of dirt, they discovered a waterproof container. Inside lay physical evidence Catherine had methodically gathered: concrete samples labeled with dates and locations from the Bayview Tower construction, original inspection reports with official stamps, clearly different from the altered versions in city records, and a flash drive. She's been collecting evidence this entire time, Okonkwo whispered, her hands trembling as she examined the concrete samples. Later that afternoon, in the makeshift lab of Garland's chemist friend, the concrete analysis confirmed their suspicions. The samples contained substandard materials, deliberately mixed to cut costs while maintaining surface appearance. The formula would pass initial inspections but deteriorate dangerously over time. This proves intentional negligence, the chemist explained. These samples contain almost 40% less structural integrity than building code requires. The entire building is essentially a ticking time bomb. At 4:15 p.m., Martinez met secretly with FBI agent Dawson, who had been skeptical of his theories until presented with the concrete evidence, literally and figuratively. We've had suspicions about corruption involving Boston construction projects, Dawson admitted, but connecting it to a missing person and potential kidnapping elevates this significantly. I need to verify the evidence is admissible before we move. In Vermont, Margaret placed 16 candles on a small chocolate cake, Noah watching quietly from the doorway. Despite the circumstances, she was determined to mark his milestone birthday. "Do you think this year will be different?" Noah asked, arranging family photographs on the table, including a digitally aged image of Catherine that an artist had created, showing how she might look now. "I hope so, sweetheart," Margaret answered, her voice carefully steady. "No matter what happens, we'll face it together." That evening, Agent Dawson revealed the FBI's most closely guarded secret. They had been monitoring Catherine Mercer for the past 8 years. She was initially taken as a warning, Dawson explained in Martinez's apartment. Westridge thugs grabbed her at South Station, intending to scare her into silence about what she'd discovered. But when they realized how much documentation she already possessed, she became too valuable to eliminate. "So they kept her prisoner all this time?" Martinez asked incredulously. "It's more complicated," Dawson continued. About 3 months after her abduction, one of our undercover agents infiltrating the construction corruption ring discovered her. Rather than exposing our operation, Catherine agreed to work with us, gathering evidence from the inside. You let her family believe she was dead for a decade? Martinez's voice rose with anger. She made that choice, Dawson replied quietly. They threatened Noah and Margaret directly. Catherine insisted that maintaining her disappeared status was the only way to keep them safe, while she helped build an airtight case against everyone involved. A partial flashback revealed Catherine's impossible choice, standing in a darkened room with photos of Noah sleeping in his bed, facing Drake's ultimatum: cooperate in their scheme or watch her family suffer accidents similar to her husband's. As dawn broke on Noah's 16th birthday, Martinez received the arrest warrants he'd been building toward for months. Captain Wright was quietly detained upon arriving at the station, while simultaneous raids targeted Drake's mansion and the offices of Westridge Construction. Across town, Noah and Margaret arrived at the cemetery under careful surveillance by Martinez's trusted officers. Noah placed fresh flowers on his father's grave, whispering words only he could hear. "I wish you could see me now, Dad," he said softly. "I'm taller than Mom was when she left. I hope wherever she is, she knows I never stopped waiting." From behind a nearby oak tree, a slender woman with auburn hair threaded with silver watched, her hand pressed against her mouth to stifle a sob. Catherine Mercer, now 41, had changed dramatically. Thinner, her complexion paler from years indoors, her once vibrant eyes now carrying shadows of things no one should witness. As Noah turned to leave, he froze. Across the cemetery plot stood a woman whose face he knew only from photographs and fading memories. Their green eyes, identical in shade and shape, locked across the distance. "Mom?" The word escaped as barely a whisper. Catherine moved forward slowly, as if approaching a frightened animal. Noah stood paralyzed until Margaret turned to follow. His gaze, her cry of recognition breaking the spell. The three collided in an embrace 10 years overdue, words failing, as tears flowed freely. Martinez and Garland watched from a respectful distance, ensuring the moment remained undisturbed and secure. As the family began piecing together a decade of shattered moments, Catherine looked at her son, now nearly her height, and promised with tearful determination to reveal everything. "There's one last story I need to tell you, and it begins long before I disappeared. It begins with your father noticing something he shouldn't have, just as I did years later.